Due to a shortage of long-stay accommodation and support services for people with a mental illness, Sydney's homeless shelters are being inundated with mentally ill clients.
Mental illness is one of the factors, or the big factor, in causing the shortage of beds for homeless people, and why people are choosing to, as we term it, sleep rough. We have accommodation here for 100 men a night. Now, I mentioned to you that 80% of our people have got some form of mental illness. I wouldn't say that 80 of those beds are taken up by people with a mental illness, but there would be a large proportion of them.
The introduction of deinstitutionalisation policies in the past was designed to place the mentally ill in community care. Current levels of government funding are struggling to deal with the extent of the problem, which sees many mentally ill people end up homeless, either living on the streets or in shelters. Brian Johnson has been living on the streets since he suffered a nervous breakdown 12 months ago. He supplements his government benefit with the money he makes shining shoes.
Now, most of the hostels are full of mentally ill, okay, which there's nothing wrong with that because they're a priority, but at the same time, okay, other people can't get in.
Diane Gadden knows only too well of the pressure and grief of dealing with a family member with a mental illness. She lost her daughter to suicide 16 months ago.
And there were times where she was refused admission into hospital and just turned out onto the streets with no money, no keys to her home, and she would sleep in the streets because her parents wouldn't know about it. My daughter could well have been a permanently homeless person had it not been for my husband and myself. We were there for her.
Edward Eagle Lodge in Surrey Hills is run by the Wesley Mission and houses up to 76 homeless people every night. David Pocklington has been working with homeless people for over 20 years and says ongoing support should be priority when dealing with people with a mental illness.
A lot of people who are homeless and end up in a crisis hostel have fairly deep issues in their life, especially if it's a chronic mental illness or a deep addiction situation, and they're going to need a level of support for a number of years. It's not just a case of give them a bit of counselling, snap the fingers and everything will be all right.
The City of Sydney and the Department of Housing jointly fund an outreach service for homeless people. It's not that the government isn't doing anything about homelessness issues. A lot of good work is being carried out. But there is only so much that can be done within a given budget.
There are mental health supported housing programs and there is support programs for people with a mental illness. But I guess the fact that we do see a number of people with a mental illness on the streets would suggest that perhaps we need to look at that and see how we can better respond.
People I call homeless people, okay, are the mentally ill. The guys who can't do anything for themselves. There's a lot of guys just sitting around with signs asking for money. You know, a lot of those guys can help themselves, but they choose not to. It's the guys who are going through rubbish bins and not begging, okay, are the real homeless people, the guys who are mentally ill.
We talk a lot about the Richmond report closing down the asylums, 20, 30 years ago, whenever it happened. Well, I suppose to a large extent we have become the mental asylums ourselves, the Salvation Army, the Edward Eagle Lodges. We are now, in a sense, the asylum for people who are not to the extent where they need locking up, but do have a mental illness.
The ability of crisis centres and night shelters to meet the needs of people with mental illnesses is limited. Staff in these facilities are usually welfare officers and not properly trained to give care to mentally ill clients.
We believe that we're doing the job that perhaps should be done by the health authorities, and I'm not saying that the health authorities are not doing their job, I just don't think there's enough money.
I haven't slept in a bed for over 12 months, I would like to have a break just for a week off the street, but not in a refuge because I don't like them at all, But I just can't make that $120 on the day where I'm going to get a room for a week. It's just too hard. I make enough money to feed myself and that's it.
Brian has slept in this doorway with a good friend of his for the past 6 months. Keeping his belongings secure from thieves and other homeless people can be a real challenge.
All my shoe shine gear's in here, as you can see. I've got to keep it all in there so it doesn't get pinched, and I have my trolley next door.
Safety is one of the biggest concerns for those who sleep rough. 2 weeks ago, a couple of drunk youths decided to attack Brian and his friend while they were sleeping.
They grabbed this rock. It must have been heavy because it took two of them to actually pick it up and start swinging it and throw it in. And it just missed me mate's head, or actually just missed his head about by that much. And if it had hit him, it would have killed him.
So I mean, as far as setups go for sleeping rough, this looks pretty good.
Well, it's not bad, you know, when you consider, you know, a lot of mentally ill people out there, right? They wouldn't even know how to set something like this up, you know. Most of them just sleep out in the park, not even with a blanket, you know, or they'll just sleep in the doorway without a blanket, nothing. You know, we've had people come in here trying to feed things, but, you know, I tell them, you know, listen guys, you know, this is my home, you know, keep out of it. It's like if you own your own house, if someone breaks into your house, you know, it's an invasion on your privacy.
So what's on the cards for tomorrow?
Well, same routine. I go out and I'll shoe shine. Even though it'll be raining all day tomorrow, I still get out and give it a go, you know, because it's my shoe shine gives me motivation, gets me out there.
Research has shown that it's unlikely that someone will recover from a mental illness if they don't have stable accommodation and support.
So the government is very aware of what the problem is, and they come out with promises about what they're going to do, but it doesn't happen.
So what does the future hold for the mentally ill who find themselves to be homeless?
Well, I guess there's a range of things, and we've identified some priority projects in the draft homelessness strategy for the City of Sydney, one of which is to improve pathways out of homelessness for people who are particularly vulnerable and complex. And I'm talking about people that not only may have a mental illness or a drug and alcohol problem, they have both.
With the right amount of support, mentally ill homeless people have the real potential to re-enter mainstream society, hold employment and become more contributing members of the community. Getting that opportunity is the biggest challenge.
One fellow that looked, unfortunately has since died, but I was surprised to see him there. He used to sit in the lane, but one day I saw him in there playing chess. And he wasn't doing too bad a game either. So that, you know, I mean, don't write them off. They are somebody.
Stuart O'Rourke, 9MSN.